Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our spaces today. And ASG, thank you for being here and being our honored guest and our speaker. We look forward to hearing your story. Let's do a quick mic check. You guys tell me how do I seem to be coming through this morning? Is the audio okay?
Sound good to me.
Fantastic. And welcome to those who will be joining us after the space. We understand a lot of folks can't listen in this hour of the day. Many people are working in different time zones, but that's okay. Ask everyone to do a favor. And if you know someone that could benefit from this information, uh, do them the favor, us the favor of sharing it out to them, sharing the link, and you just never know how you may encourage another person or even save a life. And so I have a little bit of a show structure to go through today, but I'm not going to stick with that. I'd really interested, ASG, in hearing your story. And what really captured my attention was you said uh, a young man that beat depression. I'm not on your profile currently, but it was something along those lines, and I thought that was fascinating because as a clinician, I find so many people of all ages that they really just can't seem to tackle or make a dent in depression. So I'm going to hand over the mic and just share your background and your story with us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, in my bio, that quite literally is the start of it as a kid that beat depression. I do agree though with what you're saying about how people do really struggle to like make a dent. We have like a kind of there's a few of my friends that we would speak regularly, and we have this like kind of saying is you want to you want to beat it, not learn to love with it. It's kind of always been, and the kind of anything that you do, you can't, you don't want to live with the normal results and stuff like that. You want to learn how to get your own, and it's the same in depression. You want to learn how to actually beat it. You don't want to just live with it and have good days or bad days. You want to be able to actually break free from it because it can be quite, can be a little bit like a padlock in certain ways.
A padlock. That's a great metaphor. The padlock of depression. And as someone who's gone through it my whole life, off and on, I first remember, uh, what you might call depression after I lost my mother at a very young age, and I'll talk more about my story later. But um, it really can be a recurrent thing over your whole life. And when did you first notice depression in your life? What age were you?
Um, to be honest, I think I had it more like most of my school life. I definitely noticed it more whenever I was around 12, 13. I just couldn't really get myself to. It was all I don't know what it was. It was almost like normal situations, like going to school, playing sports, just going to talk to someone. It just there was something about it that just it constantly made me feel like I shouldn't have been doing it. I wasn't good enough to do it. And then as it started to become more clear to me, then I started to actually see it then as I was actually battling it because in school and stuff, it was like I'd look at people and go like, these people genuinely think that I'm nothing, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, things like that there, and then obviously it escalated quite a lot. But I think that's when it became apparent to me anyway. Obviously, as I went through life a little bit more, then it did become very obvious that I was battling it. But I would say I would imagine I would say that there is a lot of people that they have it from a young age, they just don't notice it. I
Hmm.
would say.
Hmm. Well, at a young age, we're still getting to know what life is and how things work, and what's normal and what's not normal. And but what about your friends? I think you might have mentioned something earlier, but what about your? Did you look around and see that other young people your age, kids maybe, were struggling with similar things?
Not so much at the time. Definitely as I got towards like I was actually beating it, and now I've definitely looked at it like that. But whenever I was in school, I kind of thought I was the only person that felt like this. I kind of thought there was no one else in the world could understand what I was going through, things like that. But I think that is quite a common I think that's why a lot of people do feel like they're on the battle on their own because they do think like that. It's quite an easy thought process to fall into because as I've said it recently on my profile and stuff that yeah things like mental health and stuff I understand that they're big in the news and the media now. They kind of need to be taught in schools because I remember at the time and even now that I'm a lot more knowledgeable about the subject. I noticed now looking back, a lot of people were battling it then, and I somehow just bypassed it at that age and thought that it was only me.
Hmm. Oh, and
It's quite
I
insane.
think that's very common because we're we're actually first going to criticize ourselves. One of my favorite quotes that I actually didn't hear or read rather until I got on X was about abuse in children, and it may have been around a while, but I just a quote I hadn't heard, but a pretty tragic yet timely and wonderful quote that when you how's it go when you abuse children or don't treat children right, or you could just fill in the blank. Children don't grow to hate you; they grow to hate themselves. And one of the worst things that I see with kids, and I don't have a lot of kids that I treat these days. I have an older group, usually in the early 20s on up till, well, death, but not a lot of kids. But when I did treat kids and still do treat a few, the first thing they think is something must be wrong with me. And then they learn to identify things in the world that way. So it's really uh, kind of a dividing line. Some people will grow up thinking, well, it's everybody else's problem. But then others, probably far more, will grow up thinking everything is my problem. And I think that's a schema, as we talk about it in therapy, a storyline, if you will, a storyline that we tell ourselves, oh, if this person is behaving this way, that it must have been something I've done. If my life isn't working well, it must have been something I've done, or I'm being punished. Did you ever think that you were being punished for, uh, I don't know, just for being alive? Depression was your punishment?
Definitely at times, because I remember definitely in school. In school I was always I always kind of looked at myself like as underachieving constantly. So when I was looking around people that maybe it was a jealousy thing that I wished that I was in their position. I was kind of always blaming myself, like there's like God, there's some reason I've done this, and then I would get in my own head about maybe things that I seen when I was a kid and stuff, and then I'd be like, that's the reason why I'm not good enough. That's the reason why I'm terrible. It's the reason why I'm a bad person, and then it would kind of then spiral into instead of turning around and thinking, right, maybe I'll try and do some of these things I want to do. I would then beat myself up and just stop it completely, which put me in an even worse place in my own mind because then I'd be always thinking about what ifs and what could have been, and then I'd break down maybe my own brain even more.
Wow. And I think, did you say that you thought perhaps sin in your life was the cause of this? You had a kind of a religious belief thing?
It definitely played a part, but it then also would like it would have then went on to it would have been like a simple thing like I would have thought, God, I treated that person with no with bad manners one time, or I didn't say thank you when someone gave me something in the shop. Like it would be a simple thing, then it would spiral onto. It was definitely part
Oh,
of. It definitely would be a part though of like oh, I wasn't putting my faith in God and stuff like that. Then definitely did play a part, but it was just kind of just whenever you're in that mode, and anything you feel like anything's a burden.
yeah, yeah. And I want to get to the burden part because I think that is so essential in the conversation. But I want to thank you for bringing that up. I've actually, as a clinician, I need to start doing a better job uh, seeing if people's religious beliefs play more into their mindset because I think sometimes I take that for granted. But in thinking about it, since you brought it up, it's the whole discussion on a theological uh, uh, in the area of theology, that of perfection, and people read that in scripture and look at it in modern day terms, and that is not what it meant back when it was written. I think that we need to tell kids, when it comes to religion, that look, we're all in the process of becoming something. We're in the process of becoming more. That doesn't mean that you're worthless now. That doesn't mean that you don't count. But I don't think that in my field of mental health, we spend enough time educating parents on how to help kids develop a healthy self concept. And so everything they hear that is negative kind of sticks to their brains like flypaper. And it's,
Yeah.
now that you bring that up, it's been a long time since I've been a kid, but it really worked that way for me. I grew up as a kid thinking I was the, most worthless kid in the room. I wasn't good at sports. I wasn't all that great at academics. I didn't really see the value in them. Um, I was just this weird kid that liked to sit by himself in a corner and read books or read back then we had the encyclopedia, and I was just a weird kid. I was a wallflower. I didn't know how to dance. I wasn't a joiner. I wasn't part of the in crowd. And you start to personalize those things, and you bring that self concept with you like luggage. uh, not to quote an overused colloquialism. um, uh, you just take that with you through your life, and that kind of frames your whole existence. If something bad happens at work, you think, oh, that's because I'm worthless, useless, don't measure up. In school, I must be failing because I don't have what it takes. And of course, women struggle with it too, but and not to, you know, uh, do comparisons here, but men who run off of confirmation and significance, uh, I see men really, really struggle with that. I'm useless. I'm worthless thing. I'm a bad husband. I'm a bad son. I'm a bad employee. I'm just a bad everything. But well, what kind of became the turning point for you in your life? Maybe was there something that woke you up, or some information you got? I mean, what really began to turn the tables on depression?
Um, for me, there was no real. There was slight coping mechanisms. Like I could find comfort in whenever I was at school doing subjects I enjoyed or playing sports that I was good at. But then the real turning point came when I left school and I was kind of thrown into the world by my own. Had to go into work and stuff, and it was the kind of thing where all those comforts that were once like an easy way for you to distract your mind, they they were kind of overcrowded by other problems now that were created because you were out on your own and you were out into the adult world. So that was the real turning point where I would say it spiraled quite badly before it got better, but that was kind of the time where I came to I have to now actually think how can I actually stop feeling like this because it's getting to the point where it's beyond a problem now. It's actually something that could be a danger now. Like so, I would imagine it was them, but it then it would, whenever I left school, it was kind of there wasn't. I don't know if maybe this is the school system just being a little bit flawed, but there was no real advice on how you handle that at work. So for me, already being vulnerable, already being broken down, already not really wanting to be on earth, being thrown into the world and going, right, now find a way to live the rest of your life. That to me just was it was so daunting and terrifying that I almost didn't want to get better. I almost wanted the dark shadow to just take over me. The kind of thing. So I think that was the point where it turned in a good way, but it also turned in a bad way. So it turned bad before I could see the shining light that was right. Now I actually have to work on this.
Yeah, because it's really kind of a slippery slope. I view depression as a slippery slope that if you don't do something, if there's not some type of activation in your life, it's not going to stop. It's gonna. it actually gains momentum. Um, and I like how you said the dark shadows thing in there. But for those you join us later, we're here with ASG. We're talking about beating depression and creating an unbreakable life, and it's just hopefully real talk about us real people that do real life things. And every human being is susceptible to depression, and it really, really matters what you decide to think about it, what you decide to do about it. Here in a moment, I'll get into some clinical practice research about it, and maybe burst a few bubbles and correct a few myths and misconceptions about it. But when you finally started to see that you needed to do something about it, what were some of the first things that for you that seemed to work?
Um, well, getting to the first thing that did start to work, though, I had tried just about every cliche and viral technique there was in the books. I was taking cold showers, I was cutting things out of my life, speaking to myself in the mirror. No, I felt more and more like an idiot that made me feel even worse. But the first thing that really helped me was I was there maybe 2 or 3 years after I left school and I wasn't doing any kind of activity regularly. I kind of put on a lot of weight and got out of shape quite quickly, and I felt it kind of dawned on me that that's just another problem on top of a big fire. But I started going for someone who I worked with was telling me about how they would always go running. It was just every time you spoke to him, he would always talk about how he was going running. So I was like thinking one day, I was like, I'm just going to try a run. I've tried everything else. I'm going to try and go for a run. And I remember specifically whenever I asked him how does he do his runs, he says he sets a target for distance and he runs that distance, tracking the time, and then afterwards he keeps running until he can't go no more and he stops. So I tried it one time and I was completely unfit. I think I got maybe about a mile and a half and I was done. But I then just kept thinking. He said that you just keep going and see what happens. And I kept going, and I maybe only ran for 10, 15 more minutes. But for those 10, 15 more minutes, you the you have so many bad thoughts in your head. You have so much terrible things coming up in your mind, but you almost can't focus on them because you're trying to remember to breathe and you're trying not to let your legs give out. And I started doing it maybe once a week, and I started slowly realizing that instead, like when I would go to bed, the big thing for me was I couldn't sleep because everything was going around my head. But now, as I started implementing this routine, I was going to bed and I was picking one thing out of the big hurricane of thoughts, and I was starting to break it down in my head before I went to sleep, and then I would get to sleep peacefully and wake up the
Wow.
next morning almost like I had a plan. So I kept doing it, and as I kept doing it, the distance obviously that I was running while I was tracking it got a lot longer. But because it got a lot longer, my body was wearing down through that run. The last maybe mile or mile and a half that I was running without any time and without any thinking about distance, where I was just going and battling my own mind, it was tougher and tougher and tougher. So so maybe about 2 months in, instead of picking out a random thought whenever I was going to sleep and breaking it down, I was I had this routine of every morning I would sit at my desk and I have this massive book in my parents' house that is it's back to back filled with spider diagrams where I wrote random words that were in my head and put out random lines thinking, right, how do what steps can I take? Small steps. So like I was out of shape, right? Can I eat a little bit better? Can I start going to the gym? Can I put more emphasis on activity? Can I start boxing? Can I do random things? And these books are filled with just every problem I had in my head, everything that was making me feel terrible. So the as I kept going through depression times and off and on, I would stop these runs and then just face the problems. But it was always kind of this sticking point where I would beat one problem, but another problem would pop up. It would just be a problem I never thought I would ever have, but it kept popping up. So I'd have to start these runs again. And I got to the point where I was like, I got to the point where these runs were taking a toll on my body. Obviously, if I was doing them for a year, they were taking a toll. My body was getting injured a lot easier. I was losing weight, but I was also getting sick quite quickly because I wasn't eating enough and I wasn't eating properly. So that was then creating more problems. So it was just a kind of a matter of I need to sit down now and find a more sustainable way. And I I can't remember what movie I watched, but I watched a movie where this guy would always say whenever he was talking to someone who was upset or they were angry, have you ever had a conversation with yourself? And I kept going into my head about it and I couldn't get it out. And then I seen a Facebook video that Facebook videos were going viral at the time. And it was I think it might have been like some kind of motivational speaker, but he said if you sit on the edge of your bed and think long enough, you'll find the problem with yourself. But it resonated with me, but it didn't make sense at the same time. So I started, there was one of the issues I had was I had really badly riddled with acne. So I was like, right, need to fix this. And the first thing I think of was to start a skincare routine. So as I was doing the skincare routine, looking into the mirror, I started developing I would call it a morning talk with myself where I would just look in my own eyes and have a conversation in my head with myself. And it was almost like making a mental to do list of things I need to do that tomorrow when I come back here and have this talk, I can thank myself for doing. And
Oh, wow. That I
that
can thank
became
myself for doing. Now, that's powerful.
that became my routine. And like even now I'm maybe 5 years removed of ever experiencing depression now, but I still do it daily almost on instinct because now I'm looking at it, I'm like, if I can do this over a course of a year, every single day I'm getting a little bit better, a little bit stronger, a little bit better at something. So whenever I come back to the end of the year, I sit at the table, usually at Christmas, sit at the table and I just have a moment to think, right, what was I thinking when I was sitting here last year? Well, who was I last year? And then it starts seeing all the results build up and build up and build up, and that kind of almost like brightens up the darkness. Like these are these things that might be wrong. I mean, these are things that might be problems, but look at everything else. Then look at what else I've done. That was my routine of getting out of it, slowly shifting out of it. Obviously, there was loads of other things that were in there, but those were the two main things that it was almost just like a moment I could have with myself instead of being feeling like I was in the world, like kind of everyone against me. It was kind of just two moments where when I was out in those big runs, it was just me. When I was having these talks in the mirror, it was just me having a conversation with me. So it was just kind of the way I had to isolate myself without actually isolating myself from the world.
Wow. That's amazing. And I'm going to point out just a few things that ASG said for you guys that are just really golden nuggets here. And I'm going to frame it so it really makes sense. Everything in your body works through motion. If you really think about it, everything is motion. There's a reason that, and I'm going to get kind of graphic when it comes to body functions here, so I'll give the TMI, too much information warning. But let's start with sweat. Sweat is the movement fluid from one part of your body to another for a purpose, and it's of course to cool your body. Um, Tears are movement of fluid. When you go to sleep at night, cerebrospinal fluid ramps up uh, in your brain as a flushing mechanism to get rid of contaminants in your brain, hence movement. The circulatory system works better. I mean, your circulatory system, of course, it is pumped by your heart, but if you spend your life sitting in a lazy boy, the movement of blood through your body, lymph through your body, is only through your heart, blood that is, and getting up and moving around facilitates better blood flow. So it's your whole body that should synergize with your heart to affect blood flow. And moving of fluid through your body. If you sit long enough, you'll get edema in your feet, and you've seen older people in nursing homes and their feet swell up. What's a good thing to do? Prop your feet up, move around, get exercise, things like that. Everything works with movement. Here's the TMI part. Your bowels work better if you move. There's a reason that you will get up and go to the bathroom in the morning, usually for most people, and have a bowel movement because movement facilitates how your bowels work, how your intestines work. Everything is with movement. So now think about that and how movement contributes to physical health. Well, it's the same thing with psychological health. And what ASG said so very well, and thank you, my friend, for doing that. I just want to say you have an amazing story, and I'm sure you know it, but it needs to be said. All the lives that you can change by sharing your story, all the lives that you can save by or help save themselves by sharing your story. So if you're out there listening to this and you have and you suffer from depression or another mental health issue, the best thing we can do is to not waste that hurt. It hurts anyway, so why waste it? Share it with people, and that's another part of movement. Move your life ahead by helping others move their life ahead. So, in the field of psychology, we have two terms: behavioral activation and behavioral deactivation. One of the prime drivers, contributors of depression is behavioral deactivation, lack of movement. And just as there are also many movement related or lack of movement, that is related physiological disorders, there are behavioral deactivation related psychological issues, and depression is one of those. Um, so you give your brain something to do. I recommend when you use the term depression in your mind, as we all do, like you'll get up and or you'll notice that you're experiencing depression. Instead of just saying I'm depressed, add this three-letter word to it: and. And I'm depressed. And now, maybe surprisingly, I learned that from my son when he was just a kid. I would say something and he would say and that was the big thing here, I guess 15, 16 years ago, where kids would say, your room needs to be cleaned. Well, so what, in other words? Well, if you add that three-letter word after depression, I'm depressed and I'm going to get up. I'm depressed and I'm going to go for a run. I'm depressed and I'm going to, do whatever, a crossword puzzle, anything to get moving. Um, the lowest cost treatment for depression available to each of us is move, move, move. 3 doses of moving on a regular basis. And there's all kinds of neurological reasons that we won't get into today, that we haven't already. Um, just quickly, that affects the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is like the bus driver of your brain. If you have hair, it's right below your hairline on either side of your head. The DLPFC, dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, and moving contributes to this fancy term. It's fancier than it probably should be, but neuroplasticity, uh, able to look at things in a different way. Well, let me ask, what are some things and you mentioned a few of those, cold showers, were one you mentioned, but what are some things that you found, just for you anyway, ASG, that simply did not work?
Um, there's loads of they didn't work at the time, but now as I kind of start implementing them a little bit, like I'll still hit cold showers sometimes now and stuff, but they do work. They do work as part of a routine, but they are just a small thing on top of the big mountain in reality. Like cold showers they'll maybe will make you a little bit more disciplined. They'll give you a little bit more energy and motivation in the mornings. But if you want to beat depression, they're not going to be much use to you in the near future. There would but things that don't work in the height of depression anyway. In the height of depression, I only tell people to just exercise and recognize your thoughts more, because there's no point in you constantly like battling against your own head if you don't actually know what's in there. if you don't actually face what's on there, you need to actually have a think, right, where are the areas where this is stemming from? Because otherwise you're just you're just constantly running away from something you're never going to outrun. But things like cultures didn't work at the time. I think eating healthy didn't work to an extent. It helped a little bit with exercise, but it didn't help in the short term anyway. Not over a short period of time like I wanted it to. Reading helped to an extent, but I think at the time though I was reading the wrong books. Um, what else didn't
What
really work?
do you have a book that you would recommend that you think really might make a difference?
Um, I r- a book that I've reread a couple of times is Tim Grover's The One in Mindset. It kind of talks about he's a athletic trainer who worked with Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan, and he talks about like how whenever he left college, how he wanted to go into athletic training for professional athletes, but he was kind of felt the same way I felt. He was kind of thrown into the world and not really given direction, so he had to find his own way. But he was talking about then how walking in to practice with people like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and
Hmm.
seeing the way they thought, it was kind of like I think part of the book that is my favorite part, and I always like anytime I'm kind of like struggling to find fire in my belly or anything, I'll always reread it. As he talks about he his child was crying her eyes out because he had to leave to go to Philadelphia the weekend of her birthday to train with Michael Jordan, and he walks in and he's beating himself up all night. He hasn't slept. He's feeling terrible, feeling horrible. And Michael Jordan's best friend had just been in a car accident and he was almost fighting for his own life in hospital. And he walks in and he goes to Michael, he goes, "How you been? How you feeling?" And he said, "Great." And he has a conversation. He's like, "But your best friend's in hospital, not feel bad, you can't see him." And he goes, he said, he's fighting in there, so what's the point in me in there worrying about it? I could be in here fighting and he can see my results and hopefully that spurs him for his own. And he was talking about then how he went home that night and he was like, this is the reason why people who are happy and people who achieve so much heights achieve it because they never look at anything as a problem. They look at it as where's my solution? Instead of
Hmm.
thinking this is wrong, they think how can I fix it? That's always something I always reread because in his whole book he talks about the different people he's met and how he's picked different things out of their mindset and how he's changed his outlook on life. And that's always a part I reread because whenever I was like going through it, I was always looking for short term fixes like cultures, eating healthy, different things like that. Talking to people who were like maybe who were happy, say, but that that is looking at things as a problem. It's like this is a problem. This is things I need to improve on. But the main thing you need to do when you are battling depression is instead of looking at it as this is something really negative in my life, you have to look at it as where can I find a positive on it? Like, how can I make this something I get up every morning and think that's positive, that's a good thing in my life. That's there were so many things that I tried and failed at whenever I was trying to beat depression with like little fixes here and there, but a little fix is going to do okay for today, but you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to need another fix. So you're going to have to try and find something that fixes a lot of things at one time without it taking all your energy. So for me, doing those runs was picking apart my brain and then writing down my solutions, things the way I could implement a routine to fix them. That was then using the skills I'm learning from doing those runs and being just at one with my thoughts. That was me then taking those thoughts and then fixing them.
Taking those thoughts and fixing them, man. You're talking about my bread and butter right there. And one thing I want to get onto before we do get into more of what I call cognitive restructuring is instead of running from a feeling, run toward meaning. Instead of running from depression, run toward a purpose. myself, which sounds weird to people because a lot of people look at clinicians. I've been a mental health clinician for 3 decades now. I've been in the mental health field for almost coming up on 4 decades. I got into it in the early 80s, in 1984 actually, as a tech on a psych unit, by the way. Interesting folks on psych units. And but I have my own struggles, and depression is one of those. um, I will. I mean, anxiety is another. I think I've never met a psychological difficulty I didn't love. Um, but depression's my most frequent. I guess it's the most noticeable, and I've come to think of it a bit as my superpower, as kind of like a heavy barbell in the gym that I've developed the ability to lift and to press over my head, and it's not going to crush me. I'm going to tackle it. It's not going to tackle me. But I don't spend effort personally trying to get rid of it. I spend effort creating the life I want. So I found in my life I can't do both, simultaneously. I can't spend energy and focus, mental focus, trying to get rid of this thing, and also creating things. So I just create things. I do things. I do all kinds of things. I create a workout and I do the workout. I create a commitment and I follow through the commitment. I create a relationship, which I have with my wife, and it doesn't really matter what feelings I have. And by the way, I heard a cool metaphor that emotion is like the weather, mood is like the climate, and the weather in my brain varies a lot, uh, but the climate, I think, lifelong can be characterized as one of depression. I had a client years ago that we talked a lot about what's called the dark night of the soul, and and I discovered through, or we discovered, I think clinicians make discoveries with clients, and I certainly have a lot of discoveries that clients help me make, and that is, there are those people who have the ability to experience life at a much deeper level than anyone else, but they can see things that other people will not see. So I would hypothesize that folks like ASG, and maybe I can uh, put myself in that group, that since it's almost like an animal that can see a larger range of the light spectrum. We just have the ability to see more colors than other people. I know people that they may have a weather pattern for the day that you might call depression, but they bebop bounce around out of it. But that's not me. I mean, I'm not always in it, but I'm in it a lot, and I just look at that as a bit of an adventure. I see things that others don't see or can't see, and if my forays into depression is what is required to have that ability, then I say so be it, bring it on. So be it, bring it on. And so I don't run from depression. I run toward meaning. And so some of you listening may try that. Another thing I'll just add on to that real quick is although I'm a diagnostician and I've got a license to diagnose clinical depression, I don't like diagnosing. I don't find it very helpful. Consider the book Atomic Habits, um, uh, by James Clear, and he tells a story in there of a smoker trying to quit smoking, and I agree with the story, or the point made by the story, that there's a difference in saying to yourself, I am not going to smoke today, and saying I am not a smoker. And he recommends, as do I, Decide who you are. Don't tell yourself who you're not going to be. Tell yourself who you are. When you look in the mirror, be clear and tell yourself who you are, something that's healthy. And by the way, Descartes used to say, or is famous for cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I exist. I would revise that and say, I exist, therefore I have meaning. Everybody listening to this, everybody, you are meant to be here. You are meant to exist. Work on quashing any doubt whatsoever about that. You are an essential, integral, important, necessary part of the universe. And if you need something to say to yourself in the mirror, say that. But tell yourself who you are. Now, apply that to saying, I am depressed, or any other diagnosis. Diagnosis tends to be a black hole. It just tends to be a pothole for your brain to slip into that I don't recommend. And so instead of walking around saying I am depressed, say what you are. Figure out what you are. I'm a human being with purpose. I'm a father in charge of something, a mother that has meaning and purpose for my children. I'm an employee that is valuable to my company. I'm a neighbor. We all wear many, many hats, and I don't think one hat that we should put on our heads regularly is a diagnostic label. Personally, I've not found that to be all that helpful. And so in my clinical work, I don't even really go there a whole lot with people. We talk about things that ASG brought up there. What are my thoughts? And then we get very specific with that. We'll talk about the consciousness of thinking here in just a moment, um, and how that works. But we talk about the things that contribute to depression, but we talk about the things that contribute to a healthy mental pattern of programming. And by the way, uh, if you think in one direction, your amygdala and, as we mentioned, the prefrontal cortex, DLPOC, one on the left, one on the right side, left hemisphere, right hemisphere, actually will activate or deactivate. And the less an area of the brain is activated, it can also uh, 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 atrophy, shrink, if you will. And in studies, it's you can see the imaging. There's increased reactivity in these areas of the brain long term. Um, it affects how well you're able to think. It affects attention. It affects motivation. It affects problem solving, decision making in all these areas through the process of gradual but sustained behavioral deactivation. So that brings us back to those initial three solutions: move, move, move. Um, if I'm struggling with this, whatever you want to call it, depression, the first three things I'm going to do are move, move, move. Well, now, uh, we're talking today with ASG on beating depression, creating an unbreakable life. Share out the room to some folks. If you know someone in need, do them a big favor. Just send them the link so that they can listen to it now and they can go back and listen to the rest of it later. But ASG, where are you currently with your relationship with depression and healthy living? How are things going currently for you?
Right now, I would say in the last 2 years, maybe it's been the most clear I've ever thought. To be honest, it's the most positive I've ever thought. I've definitely come out the other side, like 100% guaranteed now. Now it's just kind of more the point of because a lot of the a lot of like a lot of countries in the world now it has kind of become it's almost like you need to hide it now. It's like almost like you can't have conversations about feeling down or feeling not good on your luck and stuff. So now that I am kind of definitely I can see that I'm out the other side. It's more now I'm just checking in with people that I know and I'm like making sure that if I do see someone maybe that I work with or I'm not too friendly with, I do see that they do seem a little bit down on themselves, or they do seem like they could be kind of blocked by a negative thought, I do always just kind of make time now to have a little chat with them, ask them if they're okay and things like that. Because something simple as "Are you doing okay?" It goes a long way to someone who's feeling bad and feeling depressed. Like, it may seem to a normal person that it's just a simple question, it's a small talk question, but to someone who's depressed, that could mean everything. That could mean they could pretty much treat you like a therapist.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. We need to realize the power that we have to add value to the lives of other people. I have a friend that he will say that to me. He will say, "Thank you for bringing value to my life in this way." And of course, very self critical. I think, what value, what what value did I bring, and I second guess it. But I try to train myself to just take his word for it. He's not saying it for nothing. He's saying it sincerely. And so tell people that when someone, I don't know, holds a door open for you, say that to them. And that's another depression hack, is gratitude. Gratitude. Imagine that. The more we can express gratitude to other people, the healthier mindsets we have. And even a smile to somebody, waving to somebody, um, uh, you may be the first person to smile to them in a good long time. Please and thank you and, oh, I'm sorry. Um, if ASG showed up here, people have a thing about being too nice and saying I'm sorry. I say I'm sorry all the time. What's wrong with that? If you showed up here with a broken arm, I'm going to say, "Hey, ASG, I'm sorry. Well, I didn't break your arm, but what's going on? I'm sorry that your arm is broken. I'm not taking responsibility for your broken arm. I'm just empathizing with you, because I can imagine how it would be, having had a broken arm, how it would be for you to have a broken arm today." And so I think that we could maybe ramp up when we're experiencing depression, maybe a great time to ramp up those old values of common respect and courtesy, and reaching out to people and things like that. If there's questions in the room, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll be taking some time for questions here. If I see your hand go up, I'll bring you on stage and let you talk. But what about a word on consciousness? So that's a bit. Let me start out with thoughts. The brain creates thoughts the way blizzards create snowflakes. Now think of that for a moment. The brain creates thoughts the way blizzards create snowflakes. So I am reaching up here, and I literally am with my left hand. I'm holding my phone in my right hand, and I'm plucking an imaginary snowflake out of the air. What does that mean? Now, until I pluck it out of the air and think about what it means nothing, except for that's just what blizzards do. When you have random thoughts, they are meaningless. Random thoughts are just what the brain does. And I'll share with you my most alarming and favorite thought to make the point. I could think, and heaven forbid, and you'll all be grateful to me for this that I don't. Um, I could think of stripping naked, painting my body purple, running down the roadway. What's that mean? It means nothing, except for I have the ability to produce that thought process. So humans assign a weight, a mental weight of meaning to the thoughts that we have. Let's just jump right to it. Suicide. Just because you can think about suicide is meaningless. It certainly doesn't mean that you should engage in it any more than it means if you can think of stripping naked, painting your body purple, running down the roadway, that you should do it. Be very careful the weight of meaning you assign to thought processes, because your brain is going to believe what you tell it. The brain doesn't really have the ability to not believe what you tell it repeatedly. So be very careful what you decide to tell your brain repeatedly, because one more term I'll just throw out and we'll move on here is source amnesia. Source amnesia. Um, think of Let me think. Well, think of 12 times 12, my favorite multiplication I learned in elementary school. Well, you probably said already, it's 144. Yeah, you're correct. The question is, who taught you that? You probably do not know the exact individual. Most people don't. Or who taught you the capital of your country? Unless it's your parent or somebody, or you just know, oh, it was my favorite, second grade teacher, you're probably not going to know. And that is called source amnesia. Now, let's apply this to the thought, I am stupid, ignorant, worthless, a waste of space, and that kind of thing. You'll really forget that you're the one that told you that, or if heaven forbid, a parent or adult figure told you that, you will forget the source and believe the information. And that is very dangerous, because my quick word on consciousness, we could spend all day talking about consciousness, but it is levels upon levels upon levels of membranes of thought processes that you don't register where they came from, and probably whether they add up or are accurate or not, but you believe them nonetheless. So, depression is a combination of all of these throughout your life. And so, you had a thought that you decided on when you were 6, and then you unpack that thought when you're 8 or 12 or 15 or 32, and it just built on itself and built on itself and built on itself. And now you don't even know where it came from. You just accept the information. It's like the story of the company where people are doing some strange thing, and someone asks them, why do we do this? I don't know. We've just always done it. So with depression, you can have thought processes and you don't know where they've come from. You just always believed it. And those are the things, the thought processes that we need to challenge. So questions or thoughts about that? ASG, what are some of those problematic thought processes that you've had in your life?
Um, I think that there's been a lot of them. To be fair, they all kind of do compound together at a certain point. But for me, it's all. For me, it always has been. It always kind of comes back to like comparing yourself to someone. Like I think now in this day and age, it's only going to get a lot worse with social media and kind of fake content and stuff like that. There, so it's only a matter of time before it really does get worse. But I went to school with some people who were just insanely smart people, and some people that were just like freak athletes, and I was just constantly comparing myself to them, like what I should be them, I should be at the level with them, and then you kind of then just get to put yourself in a hole because of it, because you're not. So I think that there could be many things it can stem from, but I think if you go to the root of the problem, it normally is comparing yourself to something or someone, and typically the comparison is unrealistic, because you're never, you always compare yourself to someone's end result, but you're never comparing to the work that they're putting in to get that result. So you're constantly thinking you're behind, when in reality, if you just stuck up the course of what you're doing, you probably would reach where they are.
Oh, absolutely. Another thing we do is we maximize our deficits in comparison to them, and we minimize their deficits. We maximize our deficits, minimize our skills. We minimize their deficits, maximize our skills. So yeah, it's all, I call it fairy tailing. It's always a fairy tale comparison between other people. The other thing is, why would we need another one of anybody? I mean, what a waste of space that would be. If there's already one of a person, why do you need two of them?
But boring.
But we do need at least one of them. And I think there's all sorts of philosophical discussions we can get in about that. Not to get too spooky, but the many worlds theory and alternate universes and all that kind of thing. But in this universe, you are here to occupy your space because you're meant to be here to occupy your space. No one else can do that for you. No one else can replace you. You are essential for occupying that space. The famous Mr. Rogers quote: "There's never ever been anyone like you in the whole universe, and there never will ever be anyone like you in the whole universe ever again." So be in the universe. It's in the title of what we call ourselves: human beings. Be. We are here to be. We're here to be. Uh, If you tackle things, if you do things, if you build rocket ships, if you go to Mars, that's great. That's great. That's, you got to have something to do. Everybody's got to have a hobby. Um, but you have purpose just simply existing. Our purpose is number one, to exist in the moment. And the moment's the only thing that we have. Well, I would welcome questions. And until I see a hand go up, I'll share a few things, just some tips. I would recommend uh, getting in touch with some things that ASG talked about. And of course, if you want to reach out to him, I'm sure he'd be glad to help. He does coaching in this area, as do I. And he has a wonderful take on it. And so you can DM him. You're welcome to DM me as well if you just have a quick question. No worries, no charge, no fuss, no muss. Be glad to answer any questions. But one of the quick things I would do, or I would, it's not quick, but it's an ongoing thing, is keep a journal of your thinking. Make it simple, make it concise. I think this. I believe that. I know this. By the way, I have just shared with you three different levels of cognition. There are things that I think. I think I'm going to go have another cup of coffee after our spaces concludes here at the top of the hour, but I may not. There's other things that I believe. That is a deeper level of cognition. I'm very careful with what I put in the memory banks, the storage space in my brain about things that I believe. I may just think it. I think this, I think that, I think the other thing, que sera, sera. And then there's things that I know. Um, Carl Jung was asked one time, do you believe in God? And he said, no. And the interviewer was surprised and he said, I don't have to believe because I know. There's some things that you hold so dearly that you should be clear that you just know them. I just know I am meant to be here or I would not be. Now, am I everyone's cup of tea or favorite flavor of the month? Oh, absolutely not. I'm sure there's lots of folks that would you know eat worm sandwiches instead of hang out with me or whatever. But that's okay. I don't have to be everyone's flavor, everyone's cup of tea. It's okay. So, but there are many people that do find value in my life, and I just kind of hang out with people that I find value in their lives, and I mean I find value in everybody's life, even those that disagree with me. But there are folks that I hang out with more that really fuel my tank, my family, and I encourage you to be the number one person in your life that finds value in your life. But keep a list of your thinking, and then ask yourself how accurate and realistic are these thoughts. Uh, uh, would I recommend these thoughts to the person I love most in the world? Would I recommend these thoughts to the whole world? um, and really exercise some thinking about your thinking so that you could start drawing a line through or reframing, restructuring, reprogramming thoughts that don't really serve you well. And that's really the question. How well does this particular thought serve my life? Because thoughts are tools. That's all they are. A thought is a tool. So choose the tools that serve your life the best. ASG, what are some maybe other tips before we close out the space here at the top of the hour?
Um, I think you covered most of them. To be fair, from like a science research standpoint, anyway. But when I'm thinking of things people could do daily, it is just a case of being aware of your thoughts. If that's how you do it through journaling, or like I done with just creating loads of spider diagrams in different areas, or if writing is the way to do it, or things like that. I would definitely think that being aware of your feelings is the most important. I would always, anyone that does say they are struggling, I always do say that to do some exercise, because it is a way where a lot of the time you may create more problems for yourself because you have extra energy, or you have time in your hands. Like boredom kind of sets in, and then you do start to think on problems that you kind of create problems in your head that don't exist. But I think that exercise definitely does eliminate that, and exercise is probably the best representation of what life is actually like without going through life itself. Because you could work out 5 days this week and wake up next week looking the exact same. But if you work out 5 days a week for a year, you're going to look completely different. It's always the best way that I can think of anybody who is going through a journey of helping themselves. It is probably the best way because it does open your eyes to what struggle and what growth and what consistency actually is. Uh, Other than that, I would say I would it's it's almost like people do know what positive habits and routines are. It is just a case of putting them into play. You know, looking after yourself, drinking enough water, eating healthy, getting some sunshine, taking walks to yourself so you can collect your thoughts so they're not overrunning all the time, getting enough sleep, uh, taking pride in how you look, taking care in how you dress, things, just anything that you can think of that occasionally you do that does make you feel better. Why not try and do it every day? Why not try and do it over a span of 6 months and see how much better you will then feel? Because a lot of the time you don't need to break down every single problem. You kind of just need little things that will generate you the power and the energy to face everything else.
Yeah, and I think that is so very, very important. Is imagine your vehicle. If you have a vehicle, well, how would you expect it to get you anywhere unless you provide regular maintenance on it? If you attend to it, pay attention to it, maintain it, and is that selfish? Well, I wouldn't call it selfish. I would say if I want my automobile to get me from point A to point B, I'm going to have to put some work into it and pay attention to it. So I want to encourage, like ASG just did, to pay attention to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. Don't say nasty things to yourself. I used to catch myself saying, "Oh, you're so stupid." I stopped that. That's not healthy for me to tell myself that because I'll just begin to believe the information. Say life affirming things to yourself. You're in charge of developing. We each are in charge of developing our own movie script of our life, and you're the hero of your movie. So be the or heroine. Be the hero of your own movie. Because you're the only one that can be. Make yourself the own hero of your movie. Um, well, we'll do another Spaces one of these days, and I think this was really really good. If you have any questions, please do reach out, and again, forward this to somebody that may be down in the dumps and could use the mental boost, and you might just change their day, change their life, even save their life. So, ASG, thank you so much, my friend, for joining us, and we'll stay in contact and repeat this with some more information in the near future. Anything, a positive affirmation or something to leave our audience with today?
Positive affirmation to leave. So you put me on the spot here like a motivational speaker. um, I don't know, to be
Something,
honest.
yeah,
I
something you just tell yourself, yeah,
something to tell myself.
yeah, or something that we can steal from you that you try to tell yourself every day.
um, trying to think of one I've been saying to myself recently. I say that many now, it just kind of photocopies into my brain and I don't recognize them anymore. If you're experiencing a lot of problems and it does seem like life is getting heavy on you, like there is a reason it's happening. There's something that you're being prepared for by God that He wants you to be strong enough to actually go through with it. He would like if you see someone that like if you were having an easy life and you were getting everything handed to you, at the end of the day you wouldn't learn anything. You would be weaker because you'd be expecting a handout. So things is getting tough. Look at it as an opportunity to grow and try and find the meaning within it that will eventually lead you to what you're meant to do in life.
Man, that's awesome. That's great. I completely agree. Look for the meaning. Look for the meaning in it. Well, thanks a bunch, and we'll get together again sometimes. Thank you guys joining us after the spaces in the replay. Share it out to somebody and catch us on the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.